It's the morning after the night before, and we have two brand new champions of the 100. Yes, the Oval Invincibles men and the Southern Brave women are the 2023 champions. Joining me to dissect everything that's happened in the Eliminator and the final is Harrison Burridge, our resident 100 expert, who was at the game at Lords yesterday. Firstly, Harrison, two quality finals. What did you make of it being there, seeing it live?
I think it's fair to say it certainly didn't disappoint having the live music in the interval, and was a nice added touch because you can sometimes find at games like this, the gap between games can be a bit difficult to keep people entertained, but that definitely served that purpose. But for the cricket itself on the field, I think we'll get into it deeper, but it was two different games, two worthy winners. But whilst they were neither really close games, they would definitely kept you on the edge of your seat throughout.
Right, let's dive straight in then. Start with the women, and obviously the Southern Brave have finally got themselves to a 100 title after being runners up in the first 2 years. So obviously they beat the Superchargers by 34 runs. First, I want to talk about their recovery in the first innings. They went from 8 for 2 to 139 for 6. To have a start like that and then to be able to recover it to a decent score. I mean, we'll get to the one for the men's game as well. How good of a win was that for the Brave?
Very impressive because I think 8 for 2, they had a lot of demons flashing back from previous years, especially last year when they didn't score many runs batting first in the final itself. But Danny White and George Adams, teammates for the Southern Vipers, just batted with such maturity, and they took balls that were there to hit. But what maybe I picked up, something I picked on, they didn't win a lot of twos, but they made sure they kept rotating the strike, and that scoreboard didn't really stop moving at any point. And then come the second half of the 50 balls, their last 50 balls, they could really push on and use the wickets in hand to get that total.
Of course, Danny White at 59, she's been amazing all tournament, really, isn't she? She's just one of a kind for a white ball batter in the short format.
Yep, she's been amazing all summer long. Started off in the domestic stuff, took it over to the Ashes, and then carried it through to the 100. Just a player when on song is so difficult to stop attacking, fluent batter. And I mean, yesterday, the way she got out with her partner Adams hitting it straight back at her and it hitting her and cross running her out, I think that was the only way she was going to get out yesterday. She looked untouchable, and the Superchargers didn't really have too much clue.
They didn't really have too much time to do or anything or recover. And then when it came to bowling, it felt like it was an all-round performance from the Brave as well to seal that title. Lauren Bell, 3 for 21. Again, I just touched on Danny Wyatt, but this is another player who's had a stellar summer, and she just keeps delivering, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's been fantastic to see her bounce back after the disappointment the second ODI in the Ashes, where she had that bad last over that went for 26 or something. She definitely got herself down about that, but she's bounced back superbly. And I mean, yesterday she had a wicket for her first ball, but it got overturned on review, and then take a wicket second ball. It was a fantastic display. She set the tone for the Brave in the field, took a wicket a few balls later too, and that really kind of took out any momentum Superchargers had.
Someone else who had a good day on the final is Kayla Moore, taking 3 for 15 wickets. Now, I didn't really know much about Kayla Moore going into yesterday's game, but she certainly delivered with that 3 for 15. What did you make of her performance?
I think it's probably fair to say she's one of the more understated members of this Brave side. They do pack a lot of star names, but she's someone kind of learning her trade. In this tournament's been a fantastic launch pad for her to do that. And yesterday she bowled, I mean, I touched on the maturity in the Adams and Wyatt partnership. She was the same. She bowled attacking, but not over aggressive, made sure the batters couldn't get her away consistently. And I mean, when you've got someone like Rihanna South BPR on the stumps who can kind of make stumpings out of nothing, it certainly helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, just generally for the Braves then, it was the perfect retirement present for Anya Schuschel. She's had pretty much a perfect tournament, captaining her side to the title this time. What do you think this Brave side will miss about her, and how good was it for her to be there at the end and getting that swan song finish?
I mean, I touched on that second point first. I mean, Lords will always be a special place for her. There's always photos going on social media today from when she was, I think, she was 11, saying she wanted to play here, and then she had that special day out there in 2017 to win the World Cup. So in many ways, it's fitting. She ends there winning another trophy, and it's a perfect way to go off. You could see she was quite emotional, even though I was quite high up in the stands. You could see the emotion was there and how much it meant to her. I think when Lauren Bell got Phoebe Litchfield out, I managed to pick up. She was at short fine leg, and she kind of put her arms up in the air and leant back as a big relief of joy. And she kind of felt, you could see the passion she wanted to get it done there. And I think that's what the Brave will miss. She is so much of what that team and squad have built over the last 3 years. Not only just her bowling, but her leadership and how they play as a team. Because they're going to, obviously, the big thing now is they need a new captain. There's plenty of options in the squad. George Adams does it for the Vipers, and you always see Smithy Mandner talking to the bowlers in the field when she's at mid-off. So I don't think they're going to have issues there. But it's just the presence and her on the pitch and off the pitch that they need to replace, and it would be difficult.
Before we move on from from the Brave to the Superchargers and look at where the Superchargers went wrong yesterday, the long-term success of the Brave women in the 100 competition. Now, we've had 3 editions so far, and all 3 times they've made it to the final. What do you think the secret is to them doing so well year on year and consistently performing?
I mean, they've built from the first year, they've built such a strong squad with so many high quality names. And then you also look at it, they had a lot of names kind of coming through: Freya Kent, Maya Boucher, Lauren Bell. There are a couple of names who's used this stage to push themselves up to international recognition. And I think, well, those 3 names I all mentioned there, they're all involved in England squads in the coming weeks against Sri Lanka. So that's kind of testament to the work that Charlotte Edwards has done. And when you have a coach like her track record is fantastic across the whole women's game, and another trophy for her cabinet. And she just kind of seems to breed winning teams.
She does. And I think she's a brilliant coach. I think anyone who watches the game will know that when she's coaching a side, watch out. Let's turn to the Superchargers then. Obviously not their day at Lords. At one point, it sort of did look like it was going to be their day, as we mentioned, and it just didn't really work out. Where did they go wrong? Was it in the batting? Rodriguez Litchfield didn't really fire yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, you were just at halfway. I think both teams would have been happy. It was a decent pitch compared to games of past at Lords where it's been quite slow. But for a side to get up to 100, well, just shy of 140 after being 8 for 2 early on is testament to the pitch and how well the Brave played. But at the same time, you would have backed the Superchargers to chase that, especially with Litchfield, I believe, was the top run scorer in the women's competition at least before yesterday. And then Jemima Rodriguez is another quality batter. But I think the problem lies where Rodriguez faced about 14 balls of the first 70. She just got stuck down at one end. It's kind of one of the unique natures of the format, and it can happen. But some bad game management, I think, from the other Superchargers batters, because she was, albeit her runs were boosted a bit by 4 overthrows that happened at one point early on. So she got 5 for a nudge to mid wicket or something. But she did look a class above. She looked a class above the rest of the batters, and I think you do wonder if she had 10, 15 more balls, what if for the Superchargers? Because in truth, 34 runs, it seems a lot, but when you were factoring the 10, 15 balls and she was striking at around 170, that suddenly brings the game a lot closer.
It's a bit of a shame for the Superchargers because they did look very, very strong during the group stages this year. Came 5th last year, not very good tournament, and they did very well this year. Do you think they'll have a lot of regrets now about the way they played in the final yesterday, given the fact that their batting order really just never got firing? Or will they just move on now and hope to look forward to next year and take confidence from the fact they made it to a Lord's final?
I think it's all about that last bit you said there. They can take confidence in the fact they got to the final. A lot of people, I believe, including myself on this earlier, said I couldn't see them getting much more than mid-table. So for them to even kind of qualify and then reach the final in itself is a fantastic achievement. And they've got a strong team there. That Bess Heath, another kind of a young player, similar to the likes of Bell and Kemp, who's in England squads for Sri Lanka. She's really up and coming. Same with Mue Kelly. There's a lot of names you could kind of go through the team. They've got a lot to build around, and I think they'd be obviously gutted. I think it goes without saying any team that loses the final will do, and they will look back on things where they could have done better, and they could have done a lot better with the batting and found ways to keep the scoreboard ticking and get Rodriguez on strike. But for them, a successful year, no doubt.
Let's talk about Kate Cross because she's been a highlight for the Northern Superchargers. What a signing. I mean, it kills me to see her playing at Headingley and being based in Leeds, but that's the beauty of the 100. As a signing for the Northern Superchargers, 3 for 21 yesterday to top off her season, but she's been phenomenal, hasn't she?
It's exactly what I think the team needed and why they probably have had so much success this year compared to previous years, having that experienced international class bowler who can bowl at any point in the game and will take you wickets. She took my Boucher out early the second wicket, Brave lost, and then came back well at the death to take the wickets of Freya Kemp, who I should just quickly touch on her. I've rarely seen a better display of ball striking live at the ground from her. She came out and just started middling everything from ball, and that was fantastic. But Cross got her out, and Chloe Tryon, along with the fortunate run out of Danny Wyatt at the non-strikers end as well. So I think all around for her, she had a fantastic day. Just the teammates didn't quite have the similar performances they would have wanted, but I think the Superchargers have benefited massively from having her and will do in the coming years because surely they retain her like the originals last year.
Well, we all thought the originals were going to retain her, and that didn't happen. So who knows where Kate Cross will end up playing next year. Freya Kemp got 31 from 17 yesterday, just for some context to that, a phenomenal innings there. Before we move on from the women's game, just want to touch on a controversial point from Saturday's eliminator at the Oval, obviously washed out. So the Welsh Fire didn't get the chance to complete their game against the Northern Superchargers. So we could have had a very different final on Sunday. Lots of chat about whether the game should have been extended, what should have been done. Where do you stand on that, Harrison? What do you reckon is the solution to that problem?
I think it much like the debate around cricket and schedules and stuff. There isn't probably one crystal clear solution to anything like this, but because they've clearly got fixed times, the women's game and the men's game, they've each got a certain amount of time to get their game done in. And obviously, the women's being first, they always run the risk of them being kind of the full for the men's game coming in and getting a full game. So I think probably when you get to this stage, the easiest way to do it is have a reserve day for the eliminators. So if you're in this situation next year and you're playing it on this weekend, I don't think they will because of the way the schedule's done, but you play eliminators on a Friday and you've got the Saturday if needed, so you can make sure, barring any hideous weather that is definitely possible in this country, you get 100 balls for each side in each game. So you get full games and then you can go to Sunday, have the final. And I believe today would have been the reserve day for the final, although it wasn't publicly kind of made aware of if it was to rain or anything yesterday. So that's probably the easiest way, because there is no easy way in anything like this. And it's really unfortunate for the Welsh Fire to have to, I said they're probably in the balance, the game where they were just about probably ready to push on. Laura Harris just comes to the crease and hits six. They're kind of ready to press go and really push on to a big score. And that probably would have been an interesting taste for the Superchargers. I'm sure we'll get onto it on an oval pitch that was very good for batting in many ways, and just a real shame because the women's competition didn't deserve that.
The women's competition didn't deserve that. So let's touch on the Fire whilst you're on them. For them, going into next year, they'll take so much confidence, I think, because it's a transformed team from last year, transformed energy. What did you make of them as a team coming into this year? It felt like they were more together, more as one. Is that to do with changes of coaching, changes of, personnel, stuff like that, do you think?
It can be down to anything. I mean, just we'll get onto the men's game itself, but Billings in his post-match interview on Sky kind of just said how off the field the Invincibles got things into order straight away and who was doing what and how it's going to work. They appointed as a social secretary early, and they just apparently they've had a great time off the field. So they'd celebrate each other's success on and off it. And I think that's kind of the key to any team environment. Probably Welsh Five maybe got that one better this year. We obviously don't know, so can't go too much into that. But just when you look at it from what they do on the field, they've had a lot more players to support the likes of Tammy Beaumont and Hayley Matthews, where before it was kind of, especially with the bat, it was them two or bust. And in previous years, it was very much bust. But this year, they've delivered a lot. Beaumont has really stood up and been counted. That 100 was fantastic against the Rockets. But Dunkley coming in is probably the perfect foil for her. Them two at the top. It's just been, I think it's just same with the men as well. It's just a rejuvenated side, which is the joy of these sort of tournaments in the drafts. And they probably have a few headaches on who they need to retain for next year, because inevitably, I think one of Dunkley, Beaumont, well, probably they can probably keep all of Dunkley, Beaumont, Ismail and Matthews if the system allows, but it could end up going back into the draft, which could make for interesting proceedings.
It'll be interesting to see whether Welsh Fire can continue their momentum into next year. Now, of course, the women's 100 may be over, but we've still got a load of women's cricket to come this summer. England taking on Sri Lanka, and we will hopefully bring you some content towards that later on the channel. So if you're enjoying this, please do like and subscribe. Let's turn now to the men's game, Originals versus the Invincibles. And I mentioned to you off air, I was in work yesterday watching it, sort of paying half an eye on it. And at one point in the first innings, 60, what was it? 34 for 5.
34. Yeah.
I thought, wow, the Manchester Originals are going to cruise this. But then an hour later, I was like, okay, maybe not. That's our hopes over. Another Lancashire-based team losing a final. Harrison, what a recovery from the Oval Invincibles. How do you even begin to sum that up?
I mean, it's very difficult because the Originals came out the block firing. They bowled Richard Gleeson, Josh Little, and others bowled so well up top. And they just had, at 34 for 5 after 36 balls, you'd find it very difficult to think at the time that the Invincibles would post 106, I think it's 161 in the end without losing another wicket. It's baffling in many ways, but they kind of went against the textbook of old and just kept pushing on rather than maybe settling for 120 and 130 and to say, right, we'd bowl it back. Neesham and Tom Curran batted with just there was clarity in what they're trying to do. I think that's the key in any sort of game of cricket and in any partnership. As long as you've got clarity what you're doing, it kind of goes from there. Tom Curran put on a masterclass in ball striking. He hit an uppercut for 6 over a point off one of the pace balls. That was just ridiculous. I mean, to pull that off, especially maybe Tom Curran, who's not well known for batting to the wider fans, but this tournament, I think he may have scored over nearly 200 runs with the bat. He's had a bit of a revolution in that sense, and it was fitting. He got that. He got his moment on the big stage because he's had problems with injuries, drop out from England after some poor performances. For him to be at the centre was nice, but I think the Originals on the bowling side of things will be scratching their heads how they managed to let that one go, because it seemed like they just seemed set to have not a straightforward chase, but a very manageable one at one point. But they ended up having something 15 to 20 too much to chase.
I don't know how anyone can say that they hate cricket when you can go from that far down, dead and buried, to resurrect it to get to a score of 161. Someone who also helped to that score was Jimmy Neesham, who got 57. Him coming in for the final. I mean, yeah, there's cameos when you sign something like that, and then there's that. I mean, you couldn't have asked for much better, could you?
No, I mean, the Invincibles had kind of a bit of problem with overseas throughout. They've lost Heinrich Klaas and Sunil Narine, and they had Spencer Johnson and Adam Zampa, but they've both gone to Australia now. So get Neesham in. I mean, they had Stern as well, but he didn't fire, but he played a perfect knock. Exactly why he was assigned him to bolster that middle order bat, and he didn't need to bowl in the end, but he is an all-rounder, and I mean, he certainly delivered with the bat. I think another helpful bit of that partnership was it was a left-right combination. They were able to target both sides of the grounds at all time, and probably gave Joss Butler a big headache, especially when they were going. But yeah, it was a special partnership because it really got the crowd. I say for the men's game was definitely more behind the Invincibles, what you could probably expect with it being London-based final and just kind of across the river from the Oval itself. But it really kind of got the crowd well back into it because it was kind of subdued at 34 for 5, and then they suddenly had the game back on, and those two have a lot to. I mean, Neesham and Curran, fantastic performance.
Bowling wise for the Invincibles, it felt like to me that they had an all-round attack that just consistently performed. 1 wicket each for the Currans. Sota got 1, Briggs got 1, Jacks got 1. It felt like it was a well-rounded attack. Just everyone had a good day out. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Neesham coming in for one game. Danny Briggs has been in the squad the whole tournament, hasn't played, comes in, bowls 5 balls, takes Joss Butler's wicket. I mean, that's kind of the importance of any sort of squad. And you think you got players in the wings who are ready to come in at any moment and contribute. Well, you could argue match-winning moments there, especially from Neesham, but Briggs as well, kind of has demonstrated that too. And I mean, Nathan Souters. There was a nice piece. I think Matt Roller spoke to him in the build-up to the final. He nearly retired from cricket or something around a year ago, but here he is at the pit, like top of his game, winning a tournament, the Invincibles. And I mean, he took a fantastic catch on top of his wicket, out at deep mid wicket, to dismiss Laurie Evans' classic boundary catch to be throw it back in. He had about a millimetre or two to spare, I think, and that was another moment that kind of changed the game. It felt like the whole time the Invincibles kept the originals at arm's length in the chase. Every time the originals hit a six, or seemed like they were, especially in the last 20, 30 balls, seemed like they're going to finally get closer. The Invincibles take a wicket, they put a couple of dot balls together. I think that's kind of testament and why the Invincibles have done so well this year, because they always found a way to keep a side at bay, and that bowling attack is exactly why.
And even at the end, Max Holder 37, taking it to for the originals to need 32 from 10. It sort of became agonizingly close for the originals, despite the fact it almost felt that they were down and out. Very weird game, but his innings, what did you make of it?
I think we've talked about other people throughout, but his innings is kind of why he's become such a popular name on the T20 circuit. Kind of gone from not too many knowing him at the start of someone, he only had a fantastic blast from Middlesex, a shining light for them in amongst a dismal season, and he's carried this through to here, and he's just playing with such freedom, like so many other batters like Neesham and Tom Curran in that partnership. He came out, he backed his strengths, played several ridiculous reverse sweeps and ramps and flicks to find gaps that seemingly weren't there, and hit a big six or two down the ground. I think he was, when he got out, there was that feeling that was the game over, because as long as he was there, the originals had the chance, because he was kind of starting to find his feet and really motor just before he got out. But fantastic ball from Sam Curran at the death to get that wicket.
And the Curran brothers at the death are just ridiculous. I think we'll both agree on that one. Let's stick with the originals then. And their batting didn't fire yesterday at all. After Phil Salt departed, they lost 4 wickets for 17 runs or something like that. Is it just a case maybe of just, coming in from the eliminator the day before, a little bit tired, a little bit not really getting the momentum with you, not firing, not having time to recover, meaning that you go out and you can't really get a feel for the middle playing 2 games in 2 days? Or was it just the bowling, as we've mentioned from the Oval Invincibles, was just unstoppable?
I mean, it's always hard to quantify the effect of playing back-to-back games, but they came in off a massive high, because I don't think many people had them down chasing the 196 or whatever it was at the halfway station eliminator Saturday night. So I mean, they came in as, I think, as high on confidence as they could, and they started really well with the bat. I mean, Salt, I think it's 25 or 16 he got. His wicket was, I think, a turning point, because Butler wasn't looking as fluent, but Salt was making sure they kind of made use of the power play and kept up the Invincibles rate. And the baffling thing was, I think up to around maybe 70, 75 balls, they were actually level with the Invincibles, albeit they were way off, which shows how well Neesham and Tom Curran did, especially at the back end. There was a spell when they scored 31 off 10 balls at one point, which you can probably look back on as one of the key factors in why they lost. But the originals, the middle order just didn't click, I think it's fair to say. Laurie Evans showed sparks, didn't get going. I mean, Max Holden came out in 3, was the only one. Paul Walter just couldn't get hold of the spin. He had several swings and misses before being bowled by Will Jackson. I think there's too many dot balls probably from them in that middle period, where it meant they were so far behind at the death, and ended up being that 10, 15 too many for them.
And of course, now Joss Butler's side runners up 2 years in a row. Are we going to see a Southern Brave women-esque 3 years in a row next year and go and win it?
Well, I mean, who knows? Obviously, depends on the draft and retentions, because this year's squad is definitely good enough to do it again, but they're going to obviously lose a lot of that to the draft and how the system works, you'd imagine. So for them, it's been, I mean, another successful year. It was nice for Butler to get on the field this year in the final, because he was ruled out with injury last time. But a shame for him and his team that they weren't able to get over the line. But they were beaten by the better side on the day, and probably the better side over the whole tournament. And that's what the originals will have to aspire to be next year, because they've got the foundations, and clearly they're doing something right there to make back-to-back finals. It's just getting over that final hurdle isn't happening right now.
And just finally, I know you'll want to touch on it because the Southern Brave are your team, but that eliminator on Saturday, the Originals absolutely outclassed and outplayed you, I think, on a 196 target. Going forward for next year, do you reckon the Southern Brave will just brush off, go again, or is this symptomatic of maybe a downturn in form for them this year, and perhaps that may continue?
I mean, it's always so tough to kind of figure these things out because I didn't have them really. I didn't really think they'd be up there this year. Last year, I think came seventh or eighth in the tournament, struggled, but a couple of big factors in that were the fact that Tyler Mills and Chris Chilwell bowled about 4 overs between them last year because of injury. They both came back. Mills, I believe he did finish as the leading wicket taker in the men's, and Jordan took plenty and scored plenty of runs as well to go with that. So they were two big factors why they kind of got back into those playoffs, and I think they would be frustrated. They didn't kick on, especially when you post that many runs in a knockout game. You think you should be able to defend it, but they just kind of from ball one, the Originals just blew them away. It was a fantastic display of batting. Every batter that came out kind of started swinging from ball one, and Vince and co just didn't really have any answers, especially at the Oval. There was a short side which undoubtedly didn't help any side defending on that. And I think Vince himself used that very well when he was batting at the back end of his innings. But a frustrating end for the Brave, but I think nice for them to return to the playoffs and maybe a few decisions to figure out for next year because I'm still not wholly convinced on the middle or the batting. It was nice for Finn Allen to come good at the end, played a couple of fantastic knocks, both against the Originals in the group and then the eliminator itself. Devon Conway also got some runs, but maybe if you look back on his ends and wonder did he score a bit too slowly and allowed a total become very chaseable for the Originals and one where the Brave could have defended if he scored 10 or 15 more. So just a good year for them, but like a few other sides, probably make a few changes and come back stronger next year.
Okay, so that is the men's and the women's tournaments both covered. Time for some reflections on the third edition of the 100. Now, you mentioned to me before about Sky Sports putting out an article yesterday about some of the figures surrounding the 100. Just to bring that to you, in the competition's third year, 580,000 tickets have been sold, an increase on the first 2 years. Record numbers of spectators at the Ageas Bowl for women's matches, Sophia Gardens for women's matches, and Emirates Old Trafford, Headingley, Lords, and Trent Bridge for both men's and women's. It feels like the 100 in its third year has come into its own. Maybe many thought this was going to be a make or break year. Do you think that it's made it?
I certainly think so because a lot of people, I mean, the critics of it have always been saying, well, it'll never catch on, it will never do this. I think last year the TV figures went down whilst ticket sales went up, but this year, obviously, we don't have them confirmed and those added on from the final just yet, but they've both gone up in that aspect. Ticket sales reasonably massively so, and I think there was a domestic crowd record for a women's game for the final yesterday, just over 21,000, and about just shy of 28,000 for the men's game as well. So I think a fantastic kind of day of attendance yesterday to round off the tournament because there's always going to be a lot of eyes on it, especially from the men's game, and I'm sure we'll maybe touch on other points today or in the future, but it is make or break for the men's game because of the effect it kind of has on it, and it has delivered. But people always kind of forget in those discussions the women's game is such a massive part of it, and the two do go hand in hand because at this point you can't tear them apart because they have that each side has an identity of a men's team and a women's team. They play on the same day, 4 times at the home ground, 4 times away from home, and it is that identity which makes the tournament so unique. I think because there's always a lot of talk as well about why not done the T20 basket, have done this the women's side, but in that aspect, the counties have had however many years to try and do that. Very few, apart from maybe Somerset and Leicestershire, actually promote their women's county side. So there's never been a witness from the counties.
Well.
And then
Throw that one in there.
sorry, yes, Lancashire as well. But that was just a couple that came to mind earlier. But you look at it and they say, oh, you compare it regional sides, but then you have the problem of how you're going to have 2 regional sides to a county or so, and then that doesn't create the same kind of following and having the team in one place definitely 4 times in the tournament. So I think definitely been a very good year for the tournament. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot coming out in the next days and weeks about figures, money, and all sorts of things that will be met with different reactions on social media. But a positive year because I think the tournament needed it in the backdrop of everything going on in the world of cricket. But you'd expect it to be going next year. But there's still a few things we've touched on them needs ironing out. I think one I hadn't touched on, but from the match day experience yesterday, they have this thing where when they change ends, it's a 50-second timer, and obviously they do the in-ground entertainment in that bit. But you feel at times they can maybe do 30 seconds. So players are ready, they're standing around, they push for they try and say a quick game, get it done in X amount of time. That's just probably one area as well from an in-ground perspective they could fix.
I think maybe it's building year on year. Was it always going to take till the third edition? I feel perhaps along with the blast, it built over years for audiences to come to it. It feels like the 100 men's is growing year on year. I still have my reservations about the impact it's having on particularly the One Day Cup. It is making that into a development competition. Is there a way we can schedule it so it becomes a bit more friendly around other tournaments? Is there things practically that can be done to make it, direct people to other cricket games? I have those reservations, but I think generally I share your view that this year has been very good for the 100 because the men's competition last year was not close at all. Not many close games, not really getting momentum with it. Whereas this year, I feel like people are talking about it again, which is what was needed. And the women's competition, as we say, one of the biggest strengths, going from strength to strength and just keeping on the beaten track and going one better. Right, briefly then, quickly to finish. Moments of the tournaments for you. I've got two I've gone for, so whilst you're thinking, I'll go for mine. Number one, from the men's side, Harry Brook's century at Headingley. That was just ridiculous. That man is ridiculous. Get him in England's white ball squad immediately. And then from the women's side, Shubman Ishmael's hat trick for the Welsh Fire. I mean, a hat trick is just amazing, but in the context of that game, it was just superb. So they're my two moments. Harrison, what are you going to go for and why?
I was going to go Ismail for the women's game, but just for the sake of having some difference here, I'll go for another moment from the Welsh Fire. Tammy Beaumont's, I think, 118, a landmark moment, the first century in the women's tournament, and I believe it still is the top score in the women's game. Brooke may have overtaken, top score in the whole tournament out of anyone, which is just a fantastic moment and shows kind of how they try and put the two sides of the game on parallel with each other. Then the men's game is also going to include Welsh Fire, but it was them with their tie with the Invincibles at the Oval early on in the tournament. Tom Curran sliding in after playing another fine hand with bat in hand that day to get the tie. That was a fantastic moment in the kind of week where every game was close and kind of typified what this tournament was this year.
Fantastic. Harrison, my thanks to you once again for joining us for these 4 weekly reviews. Well, the Southern Brave have bravely charged their way to their first title, while the Oval Invincibles men proved on the day that they were still invincible. Love it or hate it, the 103rd edition has provided a roller coaster ride, and it's like a drug. If you can get hooked on it, it's cricket every day for a month, and we have absolutely loved bringing it to you. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. We'll be bringing you reviews of all the England white ball action that's happening in September, as well as some One Day Cup content as well. But for now, it is goodbye from us and from the 100 2023.